Part 2. Crushing Prussia, Confronting Russia. In battle, there is only one moment for success. The great art is to seize it. Napoleon. The Battle of Jena began at 6:30 a.m. on the 14th of October in thick fog. Marshal Lannes's 5th Corps had already seized a position on the high plateau west of the town. His first task was to drive back the Prussians and make room for the rest of the French army to deploy. His infantry advanced, and fierce fighting erupted in the villages of Cospeda, Clausewitz, and Lutzeroda. Meanwhile, Augereau's 7th Corps advanced through a ravine, emerging on the plateau on Lannes's left flank, while Soult's 4th Corps climbed the steep tracks to form up on the right. Napoleon joined Lannes in the center of the field, organizing a battery of 25 guns to support the attack on Vierzehnheiligen. The village was taken, but then retaken in a Prussian counterattack. On the right, around 10 a.m., Soult's infantry secured the village of Clausewitz, but was counterattacked on its right flank near Rödigen. A decisive charge by Soult's light cavalry scattered the Prussians, hitting their infantry in the flank and capturing 2 standards. As Ney's 6th Corps began to arrive on the plateau, its brave but impetuous commander, Marshal Ney, ignored orders and plunged into the fighting around Vierzehnheiligen, was quickly cut off by a Prussian charge, and had to be rescued by the Guard cavalry. General Hohenlohe was expecting 15,000 reinforcements under General Ruckel at any moment. Until then, he remained mostly passive, holding his line and launching limited counterattacks. But he was running out of time. Napoleon had begun the battle with just 25,000 men. By 12:30, a steady stream of reinforcements had brought his strength up to 96,000. As the emperor rode past his imperial guard, one young soldier, eager to get into the fight, shouted, "Forward!" Napoleon stopped and demanded to know who had spoken. He then rebuked the soldier as a beardless youth who had no business offering advice until he'd commanded in 30 battles. But the moment had arrived. Although the guard, to their frustration, was kept in reserve, the other French corps were ordered to launch a general attack. The Prussian army began to give way. The front ranks kept their discipline, but then dissolved in a general rout. Murat's cavalry was unleashed in pursuit, running down and cutting to pieces hundreds of fleeing Prussians. General Ruchel's 2 Prussian divisions finally arrived at the worst possible moment. They bravely advanced on 5th Corps, but were soon shattered by cannon fire and broken by a French heavy cavalry charge. "Your marshal must see double," Napoleon to Colonel Falcone. Meanwhile, 12 miles to the north near Auerstädt, Marshal Davout was marching southwest, expecting to hit the Prussian left flank at Jena. Instead, he ran into the main Prussian army under the Duke of Brunswick, heading north to take up new positions. Davout's 3rd Corps, 27,000 men and 48 guns, was about to face odds of 2-1, while Bernadotte's 1st Corps, under orders to support Davout, was nowhere to be seen. Davout, nicknamed the Iron Marshal, showed no sign of alarm. He formed his lead division into a defensive line centered on the village of Hassenhausen, his infantry forming squares to drive off a series of charges by General Blücher's advance guard cavalry. His other 2 infantry divisions arrived to reinforce the line, standing firm in the face of repeated Prussian attacks. But the Prussians moved slowly and with poor coordination, failing to use their superior numbers to overwhelm Davout's flanks. At a critical moment, the Duke of Brunswick was shot through the eyes, a mortal wound. King Frederick William himself took command. Many Prussian units were still not sent into the battle, but the king, believing he faced the main French army under Napoleon, lost his nerve. Around 12:15, Marshal Davout counterattacked. The Prussian army turned and fled. Davout had won a stunning victory against overwhelming odds, but at a high price. His corps suffered 25% casualties, 1 man in 4 killed or wounded, while inflicting twice as many losses on the Prussians. Tell the Marshal that he, his generals, and his troops have acquired an everlasting claim on my gratitude. Napoleon. When Napoleon was told that Marshal Davout had engaged and defeated the main Prussian army, his first reaction was disbelief, followed by lavish praise for the Iron Marshal, later awarding him the title Duke of Auerstädt. Marshal Bernadotte, in contrast, was nearly court-martialed for failing to support Davout. Napoleon's army began a relentless pursuit of the defeated Prussians, giving them no time to regroup. 2 weeks after the twin battles of Jena-Auerstädt, Napoleon's army, led by Davout's heroic Third Corps, entered Berlin. The next day, General Hohenlohe surrendered at Prenzlau. At Lübeck, General Blücher and 20,000 Prussians were driven from the city in fierce fighting and forced to surrender. Meanwhile, 25,000 Prussians besieged at Magdeburg surrendered to Marshal Ney. The Prussian army had been shattered by Napoleon's blitzkrieg. In just 33 days, Prussia had suffered 20,000 casualties, with 140,000 taken prisoner, and lost 800 guns and 250 standards. It was a humiliation that proud Prussians like General Blücher would never forget, nor forgive. Unlike Saxony, King Frederick William refused to make peace with Napoleon. He continued to hold out in East Prussia, trusting in the approaching Russian army to rescue his kingdom. Though another glorious victory for Napoleon and the Grande Armée, their war was not over. A week before Christmas 1806, the French Emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte, arrived in the Polish city of Warsaw, now a province of Prussia. A year had passed since his great victory over the Austrians and Russians at Austerlitz, and 2 months since he had crushed the Prussians at Jena. But Russia still had powerful forces in the region, chief among them an army under General Bennigsen. Napoleon could not be master of Europe until they were defeated, forcing Russia and Prussia to sue for peace. But that winter, Napoleon's first attempt to trap Bennigsen near Pultusk was bogged down in Poland's thick mud. The Russians were able to retreat to Bialystok. The French army, hungry and freezing, was ordered into winter quarters. While in Warsaw, Napoleon began a famous affair with a young Polish noblewoman, Marie Walewska. In the late 18th century, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth had been carved up by its neighbors, Russia, Austria, and Prussia, in a series of events known as the Partitions. By 1795, a third and final partition had wiped Poland off the map. Now Polish patriots saw Napoleon as their savior, praying that his victories over their occupiers would lead to the rebirth of a Polish state. Marie Walewska became Napoleon's mistress to further this cause. Ordinary French soldiers, however, had little love for Poland, which was poor and cold, and they missed home. The desertion rate soared. There were even 100 cases of suicide. Marshal Ney, commanding 6th Corps, sent scouts towards Heilsberg, looking for better winter quarters. They found Russian and Prussian soldiers on the march. It was a surprise winter offensive by Bennigsen. Napoleon quickly laid a trap for the Russians, ordering Ney and Bernadotte to fall back and lure Bennigsen west, while he led the rest of the army north to fall on his flank and rear. But the Russians captured a French courier carrying the emperor's orders to Marshal Bernadotte. Bennigsen, now alerted to the trap, ordered a retreat, fighting a series of rearguard actions with the pursuing French. But he refused to give up the city of Königsberg without a fight and turned to give battle at Eylau. What a massacre, and without result, Marshal Ney at the Battle of Eylau. The Battle of Eylau, fought over 2 days, was one of the most brutal battles of the Napoleonic Wars, fought in appalling cold, with neither side giving ground. Marshal Augereau's 7th Corps, advancing into a blizzard, lost its way and was cut to pieces by Russian cannon fire. 5 French Eagle standards were lost. Napoleon's army was only saved by a devastating mass charge of 10,000 cavalry, led by the dashing Marshal Murat, and remembered as one of the greatest cavalry charges in history. At Eylau, for the first time as emperor, Napoleon had failed to win a clear victory on the battlefield. He and the Russians concealed the true scale of their losses, but both sides are estimated to have lost a third of their armies in the slaughter. After the horror of Eylau, both armies sought time to rest and recover. Meanwhile, a newly formed French 10th Corps under Marshal Lefebvre besieged Danzig, defended by 13,000 Prussians under General Kalkreuth. The city was subjected to a heavy French bombardment and infantry assault. After 8 weeks with no prospect of relief, the Prussian garrison surrendered on the 27th of May. Napoleon's northern seaward flank was now secure from any Russian amphibious landings. The French emperor now commanded an army of 190,000 men against just 115,000 Russian and Prussian troops. But it was Bennigsen who moved first, launching a surprise attack against Marshal Ney's 6th Corps on the 5th of June. Ney conducted a brilliant fighting retreat and escaped. Bennigsen, having lost the element of surprise and with Napoleon advancing on him, once more had to fall back. 4 days later at Heilsberg, the French lost 10,000 men in a failed attack against the Russian defenses, but the Russians continued their retreat the next day. Napoleon thought Bennigsen would head north to Königsberg, but instead he retreated northeast, moving on the east bank of the River Alais. So, as Napoleon's army marched north, Marshal Lannes' Reserve Corps on the right flank encountered the Russian army near the small town of Friedland. Ride like the wind if you have to, but tell the emperor we are engaging the entire Russian army. Marshal Lannes to his aid. Late on the 13th of June, Russian cavalry scouts informed General Bennigsen they'd located a single, isolated French army corps at Friedland. Bennigsen decided he had time to cross the River Alais and smash this isolated corps before the rest of the French army could arrive to save it. He ordered his army to begin crossing the river. Marshal Lannes, commanding 16,000 men and facing 46,000 Russians, sent an urgent message to Napoleon that he was under attack by the main Russian army. He then fought a skillful delaying action, masking his weakness behind a large screen of skirmishers, while gradually giving ground to the enemy. Lannes was still holding off the Russians when darkness fell. That night, Russian engineers built 3 pontoon bridges at Friedland to speed the movement of troops across the river. But Bennigsen was taking a huge risk. If this turned into a major battle, his army would have to fight with its back to the river, and the steep banks of the Millstream dividing its left and right wings. Bennigsen had also underestimated the speed of response of Napoleon's Grande Armée. The first French reinforcements arrived that evening. The emperor himself was not far behind. "We won't catch the enemy making a mistake like this again." Napoleon, en route to Friedland. By dawn on the 14th of June, around 40,000 Russian troops had crossed the River Alais. Bennigsen ordered an attack on the village of Heinrichsdorf to turn the French left flank. But French cavalry reinforcements under General Grouchy held off the Russians. For more than an hour of charges and countercharges, the French cavalry finally drove the Russians back. Marshal Mortier's 8th Corps had arrived to reinforce the French center. In Sortlack Wood, General Oudinot's elite grenadier division fought tenaciously against Prince Bagratión's left wing. It was outnumbered and slowly driven back by the Russians. Around midday, on a sweltering day, Napoleon arrived. He was quickly followed by First Corps, commanded by General Victor, replacing the wounded Marshal Bernadotte, as well as Ney's Sixth Corps and the Imperial Guard under Marshal Bessières. The date, the 14th of June, had special meaning for Napoleon. It was the 7th anniversary of his great victory over the Austrians at Marengo. A good omen, he declared. The battle then slowed as Napoleon assessed the situation, saw Bennigsen's perilous position, and ordered an attack to take advantage of it. Bennigsen, meanwhile, who'd been plagued by ill health all day, saw that he now faced Napoleon's entire army and ordered a retreat. This is the mission. Attack, without looking right or left. Penetrate that dense mass. Do whatever you can. Napoleon to Marshal Ney. But before Bennigsen's retreat could get underway, at 5:30 p.m., 3 salvos from a French cannon signaled the start of Napoleon's attack. It was led by Ney's Sixth Corps on the right, who first drove Bagration's infantry out of Sortlac Wood. But, as Ney's corps emerged from the cover of the trees, they were hit by heavy fire from Russian cannon across the river. As the French attack faltered, Prince Bagration rallied his men and launched a cavalry countercharge. Ney's corps fell back, but now General Victor's First Corps had appeared on their left. Its artillery commander, General Saint-Armand, advanced with 30 guns and blasted the Russians at point-blank range with case shot. Hundreds of Russian soldiers were cut down in minutes. Under this onslaught, Bagration's men began to waver and then fall back. Around 7 p.m., the Russian Imperial Guard launched a desperate counterattack to try to halt the French advance on Friedland. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. The French center and left joined the attack. With their only escape route threatened, the entire Russian army began a panicked retreat towards the river. But the houses and bridges of Friedland were now ablaze. The town became a death trap for the Russians. Many drowned trying to cross the river. Others were killed or captured. North of Friedland, some units were able to escape, fording or swimming across the river. But there was no hiding the catastrophic scale of the Russian defeat. The Battle of Friedland was one of the most decisive victories of Napoleon's career. At the cost of 10,000 casualties, he had inflicted twice as many on the Russians. Around 20,000 men were killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. 40% of Bennigsen's army. The Prussians abandoned Königsberg the next day, which was occupied by Soult's Fourth Corps, while the remnants of Bennigsen's army retreated across the Niemen River, back into Russia. Tsar Alexander's advisors urged him to make peace with Napoleon. He accepted their advice, and an armistice was agreed. I was perhaps happiest at Tilsit. I found myself victorious, dictating laws, having emperors and kings pay me court. Napoleon in exile on St. Helena. Alexander and Napoleon met for the first time on a raft in the middle of the Niemen River near Tilsit and developed an immediate rapport. Tilsit proved to be one of the great diplomatic summits in history, as the two emperors who had been at war for days feasted, paraded, and went to concerts, then discussed matters late into the night. A friendship developed while Russia's former ally, King Frederick William of Prussia, was left out in the cold. And it was Prussia that would lose most in the treaties of Tilsit, signed 2 weeks later. A third of Prussia's territory was taken away to create the Kingdom of Westphalia, ruled by Napoleon's 22-year-old brother Jerome, and the Duchy of Warsaw, ruled by the King of Saxony, which Polish patriots hoped would prove a stepping stone on the road to a country of their own. Polish troops were recruited into the Grande Armée, with the Polish lancers even becoming part of Napoleon's elite Imperial Guard. Russia only had to give up the Ionian Islands, as Alexander accepted an alliance with Napoleon. That left the French emperor master of Europe. Alexander even joined the continental system, Napoleon's economic blockade of Britain, which would ban British ships and goods from all French-controlled ports. The system had been established the previous winter by Napoleon's Berlin Decree. Napoleon hoped that by cutting off Britain's trade with Europe, he would cause financial chaos and political turmoil in Britain, allowing him to get a favorable peace. There was just one problem. The continental system did not work. Not only was it unenforceable and undermined by widespread smuggling, it damaged French trade just as much as British trade. The decisive weapon in this economic war would prove to be Britain's Royal Navy, which that summer reasserted its naval dominance by launching a preemptive strike on the neutral Danish fleet at Copenhagen, capturing its warships before they could fall into Napoleon's hands. Royal Navy squadrons blockaded all major French ports, seizing any ship that traded with France, while ensuring British merchants could continue to trade overseas in relative safety. The Navy even seized the small Danish island of Heligoland to serve as a base for smuggling British goods into Europe. But most disastrously for Napoleon, the continental system would drag him into two conflicts that would prove fatal to his empire. The first would be fought on the Iberian Peninsula, where Napoleon decided to force Britain's ally, Portugal, to join the continental system. In November 1807, a French army, supported by its Spanish ally, invaded the country. The Portuguese royal family fled to their colony of Brazil as the French occupied Lisbon without a fight. It seemed Napoleon had won another easy victory. But the Peninsular War had only just begun. To be continued.